My name is Taryn Beekler, and I am presenting my narrative speech. How many of you have reluctantly been dragged along on a supposedly fun and adventurous family vacation, only to get there and realize that it was about to be the vacation from hell? Well, I too was once a victim of a deceiving family vacation. It was precisely 3 years ago when the facilitator and mastermind behind the trip, my father, sat our family down at the dinner table to announce his brilliant idea to go backpacking in Yellowstone National Park. This announcement was followed with mixed emotions and reactions. I saw looks of pure horror, astonishment, and even a loud cackle escaped somewhere from the mere thought of our family carrying pounds of weight on our backs, hiking through one of the most acclaimed national parks in the country, while living off Cliff energy bars and possibly a hot dog or two, if starting a fire was even achievable. If any of you even slightly know my family, I'm assuming a very amusing image comes to mind when hearing this. I don't know about you guys, but when I hear the word vacation, I associate that with clear blue skies and the feeling of warm sand in between my toes. It took everything in me not to break down into hysteria. Don't worry, that comes later, when envisioning a 3-day and 3-night hiking trip that required background knowledge and a plethora of articles on how not to get swallowed whole by a malicious wild bear. Well, being only 17 years old, the children obviously had no say in where we went, and so 1 month of planning later, we half-heartedly and unenthusiastically set off for the vacation from hell. After parking the car and getting all of our gear loaded onto the packs, we began the strenuous trek to our campsite. Supposedly, the hike was only a 7-mile path, which I'm still skeptical about today. You may be thinking, 7 miles of walking? Your family must just be a bunch of wimps. Well, trust me, my mentality when we started was, wow, only 7 miles? We'll get to our campsite in a couple hours, no problem. This will most likely just be a leisurely stroll with a nice scenic view. Boy, was I wrong. Starting out, not only was the trail primarily uphill, but we had begun the hike in the early afternoon when the UV index was at its max. After the first half hour, the 5 of us were sweating profusely and were starting to feel the burden of the 35 to 40 pound weight on our backs. Talking was kept to a minimum unless it was to complain about the already forming blisters on our feet, the unbearable heat on our faces, and the heavy weight on our backs. 2 hours passed and we started asking the lingering questions. Are we almost there? How much longer? Are we going to make it there before dark? Now, if any of you know my dad whatsoever, he has an answer to almost every possible question thrown at him. This was an exception. So we trekked on, slowly becoming more weary and more worried. At this point, the sun was starting to set, and we still had no idea how far away we were from our campsite, nor if we were going to make it there before the darkness crept in. This is about the time that the hysteria set in. My 12-year-old brother at the time started crying deliriously, and it resulted in a domino effect. Next thing you know, my brother, sister, mother, and I were in hysterics, crying like babbling babies and running aimlessly through the thick brush. I think it was at that point that my dad started to become slightly concerned. Painful blisters covering each of our feet prevented us from going as fast as we should have been going, and I think that we all had some pretty dark thoughts at one moment of what if we never make it and end up dying here. Dramatic, but justifiable. We were burning calories by the second and only had 1 Cliff Bar each to tie us over until we made it to the campsite. We were ravenous. But we trudged on, because what other choice did we have? Finally, we heard a loud holler from up ahead from my dad as he yelled to us announcing that he recognized one of the landmarks. That meant we were only a mile or less away from our campsite. I don't think I've ever been more relieved in my life. It was about time, too, as the sun had almost completely set. Just as our spirits were lifting from the good news, we see a large stream up ahead. I looked over to see a look of worry in my dad's face and knew we were going to have to cross this thing. Great, our campsite was just on the other side of the stream, but of course nature had to deliver yet another obstacle on our already grueling trail. Now, don't get me wrong, it was a hot summer day, but nights in Yellowstone National Park are known to get frigid once the sun sets. Crossing the stream and being soaking wet would not be of much help to this already non-ideal situation. After strategizing the best way to cross the stream, my dad helped us each get across one by one until our feet finally touched the ground of our campsite. Delirious and irritable, we, my dad, pitched the tent while the rest of us sprawled out on the grass and tried to visualize laying on a soft mattress as opposed to the cold, hard ground. Too exhausted to even care, we skipped dinner and went straight to bed. The last thing we discussed before we crashed was a short and simple, so who's down to head back to the car first thing tomorrow morning? The vote was a unanimous hell yes. We were supposed to be there for 3 days and 3 nights. And so, first thing the next morning, we started another long but more bearable trek back as we were in transit to a warm meal and comfy bed. Immediately upon reaching the car, my mom started bawling out of pure exhaustion and relief. We ended up staying in a luxury hotel room, or so it felt, for the next 3 days of our vacation. A big, juicy hamburger and fries had never tasted more divine, and the first cold shower was a feeling I am not able to adequately put into words. At the conclusion of the speech, I'm assuming the majority of you are going to look at me with looks of pure amusement and disbelief as to how dramatic my family is. I guess it's one of those you had to be there stories. But, moral of the story, don't be so resistant about an adventurous family vacation before experiencing it firsthand, because you may just end up having the time of your life. Unless it's Yellowstone National Park and you are as inexperienced campers and melodramatic individuals as my family is.